HOA Karen pushed my disabled son into a river, not knowing I'm a drill sergeant. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know where you're watching from today in the comments below. Is it sunny or stormy where you are? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications so you don't miss our next special story tomorrow. We've got so many more thrilling tales to share, and we want you to be part of our growing community. Drop your thoughts or any personal experiences related to today's video. We love hearing your stories too. See you tomorrow. It all began when my family moved into a quiet, suburban neighborhood, hoping for a fresh start. My name is John, and after serving for over 20 years in the Army, I knew how to face difficult situations. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could prepare me for what happened next. I had left the military behind to spend more time with my son, Nathan, who had a neurological condition affecting his mobility. I was determined to provide him with a better life, one where he could feel free and supported. We moved into a beautiful neighborhood with well-maintained houses and manicured lawns. The streets were peaceful, the kind of place where kids played outside and neighbors looked out for each other. For a brief moment, I thought we had found our sanctuary. It seemed perfect. The first few days were spent unpacking, getting to know the neighbors, and adjusting to a new rhythm. I felt hopeful, like maybe we had truly found a place to settle, a place where Nathan could feel comfortable and at ease. That's when I met her. Karen. She lived right across the street from us, and from the moment I saw her, I could tell something was off. She stood on her porch, arms crossed, watching our every move like a hawk. I thought maybe she was just curious, maybe just another overly attentive neighbor. I greeted her when she finally came over to introduce herself, and though she smiled, it didn't seem genuine. There was something about her eyes, something cold that made me uneasy. Karen made a comment that didn't sit right with me, something about how the house had sat on the market for a long time before we moved in. It wasn't exactly a welcoming comment, but I brushed it off. People sometimes said odd things when they first met someone new. I thanked her for stopping by, but as I continued unpacking, I couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't approve of us. Over the next few days, Karen's behavior became more noticeable. I would catch her staring at us from her window or walking by just to see what we were doing. It wasn't just curiosity, it was as if she was keeping tabs on us. I knew what this was. Karen thought we didn't belong in this neighborhood, not because of who we were, but because of who Nathan was. His disability. His wheelchair. The way he moved through life differently. Karen had a problem with it. I could feel it in the way she looked at him, the way she avoided speaking to him. Her coldness wasn't just directed at me, it was towards my son. Nathan, 11 years old, was tough. He had always been determined to make the best of his situation. But even he could feel it. The subtle shift in the air when Karen was around. He didn't understand it at first, but I could tell he noticed the way she looked at him, the way she made him feel like he didn't fit in. It hurt me to see my son face that kind of rejection, especially after we had left behind so much to start fresh. Karen didn't just stay silent about her disapproval. She started making passive-aggressive comments, nitpicking about the changes we were making to our house. We had to install a ramp for Nathan, something necessary to make our home accessible for him. But Karen didn't see it that way. To her, it was an eyesore, an affront to her precious standards for the neighborhood. She began complaining about it, subtly trying to undermine our decisions, making it clear that we weren't welcome in her perfect little world. But what Karen didn't know was that I wasn't afraid of her. I wasn't going to let her push us out or make Nathan feel small. After everything I'd been through, nothing would stop me from protecting my family. But little did I know, things were about to escalate. As the days went by, the tension between Karen and me grew, but I tried to stay focused on what really mattered, my family. Leaving the Army had been a big transition for me, but it was one I'd been ready for. After 20 years of service, of training soldiers, facing combat, and dealing with the everyday chaos of military life, I was ready to slow down. I wanted to spend time with my son, Nathan, without the constant pressure of the battlefield or the stress of military life. Nathan's condition wasn't something that defined him, but it was something that required constant attention. I knew his struggles intimately, the frustration he felt when his body wouldn't cooperate with his determination. And that's why I decided to move us to a neighborhood where he could finally feel free, where I could watch him play and grow without the constant obstacles he faced at home. I wanted him to feel like he belonged somewhere, without having to fight every day just to be seen as a regular kid. But Karen wasn't having it. She didn't care that Nathan needed a ramp to make our home accessible, or that the small changes we were making were essential for him to live his life with dignity. All she cared about was how our perfect neighborhood looked. The ramp I was building to help Nathan get in and out of the house without struggle was, in her eyes, an eyesore. It wasn't just the ramp, it was everything. My son's disability, the changes I was making to ensure he had a safe, comfortable life, it was all too much for her. She wanted control over everything, and she didn't think someone like me, someone with a son who required special care, had any right to disrupt her image of the perfect neighborhood. At first, I tried to ignore her. I thought maybe she was just an isolated case, one difficult neighbor out of 1,000. But as the weeks went by, Karen's behavior became more obvious, more aggressive. She started making pointed comments about the ramp, questioning why we didn't just find a more suitable home for Nathan. It was clear that she didn't understand, didn't want to understand. To her, Nathan was an inconvenience, a disruption to her vision of what this neighborhood should be. But I wasn't a soldier anymore. I wasn't a drill sergeant barking orders to recruits. No, I was a father now. A father who would protect his son at all costs. I had seen my share of battlefields, had stood my ground when the stakes were high. And I knew that the only way to fight Karen was with strength, strength not of physical force, but of resolve. I wasn't going to let her make us feel unwelcome. So, I made sure my focus stayed on what mattered. I built that ramp, not just for Nathan's physical needs, but for his sense of belonging, his right to move through the world without fear or hesitation. And I wasn't going to let anyone, especially not Karen, make him feel otherwise. But little did I know, this battle, the one I thought I had already won, was just beginning. As the days went on, Karen's attempts to undermine our place in the neighborhood became harder to ignore. It wasn't just the ramp anymore. She seemed to find new ways to pick apart every decision I made for my family. Whether it was the landscaping, the front porch, or the way I arranged the furniture, Karen had something to say. It became more and more clear that she wasn't just uncomfortable with change, she was fixated on it, obsessed even. I could tell that Nathan was starting to feel the weight of it. He was only 11, but he wasn't blind to the looks Karen gave him or the way she spoke to him like he didn't belong here. Every time she turned her nose up at the ramp or made some passive-aggressive remark about how he should be more careful, I could see him pull further into himself. The smile that had once been so bright when we moved here started to fade. My son didn't deserve this. He didn't deserve to feel like an outsider in a place that was supposed to be his fresh start. I wanted to confront Karen. I wanted to tell her exactly what I thought of her behavior, but I held back. After all, I wasn't just some guy who had moved in. I was a father. A father who had spent years keeping soldiers alive, teaching them how to survive in life and death situations. And if there was one thing I knew, it was how to control my emotions in high-stakes situations. But Karen wasn't about to make that easy. No, she had another trick up her sleeve. And this time, it would hit closer to home. One morning, as I was working on the ramp, Karen stormed across the street with a steaming cup of coffee in hand. Her expression was tight, her steps heavy as if she had a bone to pick. She didn't even say hello. Instead, She pointed at the construction site in front of our house and let out a dramatic sigh. "You know, this is ruining the aesthetic of the neighborhood," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "A ramp like this. It just doesn't belong." I could feel my patience thinning. But I stayed calm, maintaining the composure I'd learned after years of training soldiers to face chaos without losing control. "Karen," I replied, my voice firm but steady, "this ramp is here because my son needs it. He deserves to have a home where he can move freely, and if you have a problem with that, you're going to have to deal with it." She scoffed, looking at the ramp as if it were a personal affront. "Maybe if you had chosen a more suitable home for him, you wouldn't have to make all these changes," she said, her words dripping with judgment. I took a deep breath, my fists clenching, but I refused to give in. I wouldn't let her get under my skin. "Let me make something clear," I said, stepping a little closer, making sure she could see the seriousness in my eyes. "My son has every right to live in this neighborhood just like anyone else. You don't get to decide who belongs here." But Karen wasn't done. No, she wasn't the type to back down easily. She tilted her head, folding her arms, and looked at me like she had won some kind of victory. "Maybe this neighborhood just isn't right for you," she said with a sneer. "You should have thought about that before moving in." I could feel the tension rising, but I knew this was a fight I wasn't going to win with words. She wasn't listening to reason. She wasn't going to change. The only thing left to do was show her. Show her exactly what I was capable of. The tension in the neighborhood kept escalating, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen was planning something more. It wasn't just the passive-aggressive remarks anymore. She was becoming more openly hostile. But I kept my focus on Nathan. He was still adjusting to the changes, to the idea of moving somewhere new, and the last thing he needed was to see his father losing control. My son's safety, his happiness, was all that mattered to me now. One Saturday afternoon, the neighborhood was buzzing with excitement. The Riverside Summer Festival was in full swing, and it seemed like the perfect opportunity to finally take Nathan to an event where he could be around other kids, where he could feel like he belonged. I was optimistic, thinking maybe Karen's influence would be limited today. I had no idea just how wrong I was. We arrived at the festival, and for the first time since moving in, things felt normal. Families gathered, kids played games, and the smell of roasted corn filled the air. Nathan's face lit up as he saw the games, and I knew he was finally starting to have fun. For the first time in what felt like ages, I allowed myself to relax. It was a fleeting moment of peace, but one I cherished. Nathan was laughing, interacting with other kids, and for a few minutes, it felt like we were just another family at a community event. But then I heard it, her voice. That unmistakable tone, grating and demanding. My stomach tightened, and I immediately turned around to see Karen, standing near a food stall with her arms crossed, watching the festival unfold. I could see her scanning the crowd, eyes darting between families, until they landed on Nathan. A subtle shift in her expression, the slight tightening of her lips, made my blood run cold. I knew exactly what was coming next. She wasn't here to enjoy the festival. She was here to cause trouble. I tried to keep my composure, not wanting to make a scene. Nathan didn't notice at first, but I could feel him stiffen beside me as we both caught sight of her. His hand gripped the hem of my shirt, his body instinctively tensing as he noticed her eyes on him. He didn't say anything, but I could tell he was feeling the same thing I was. Karen was already making her presence felt, and it was starting to ruin everything. I leaned down, speaking softly to Nathan, "Let's just take a walk around, all right? We don't have to stay long." He nodded, but his expression was still uneasy. We moved away from the crowd, hoping to put some distance between us and her. The further we got, the more relaxed he became, his smile slowly returning. We stopped by a booth, and I noticed Nathan eyeing a toy in the display. I didn't hesitate. I bought it for him, knowing it would brighten his day. We spent a few more minutes walking, but as we passed by a few other kids, I felt a chill run down my spine. There she was, Karen, now standing a few feet away from Nathan, her phone in hand. I watched her lean in, whispering something into the phone, her eyes never leaving Nathan. It was subtle, but I knew exactly what was going on. She was recording him again. Before I could act, Karen got up from her spot, her phone still raised like some kind of weapon. Then, without warning, she stormed toward Nathan. Her voice, sharp and accusing, cut through the joyful atmosphere. "What's he even doing here?" she yelled, drawing the attention of the nearby families. I couldn't believe what was happening. I started moving toward them, my heart pounding in my chest. But before I could get close, everything took a turn for the worse. The moment I saw Karen storming toward Nathan, everything around me seemed to slow down. I could feel my heart race, my pulse pounding in my ears. I had trained soldiers to face danger, to handle chaos, but nothing in my life had prepared me for this. Not for a woman who thought it was her right to push my son into a river. Not for someone so twisted, so cruel, that she would record the whole thing, as if Nathan's pain were some kind of sick joke. I sprinted through the crowd, dodging people, my mind focused on nothing but Nathan. I needed to get to him. Fast. But I wasn't fast enough. Before I could reach them, Karen did the unthinkable. She shoved Nathan's wheelchair, sending him tumbling into the river. I heard a gasp from the crowd, and the world went into a blur. Nathan's small body disappeared under the water as the current quickly pulled him away from the shore. Panic surged through me like a wildfire. Without thinking, I dove in. The cold water hit me like a punch to the chest, but I didn't care. All I could see was Nathan, drifting further away from me. His face was pale with shock, and his hands were reaching out, trying to grab onto anything to stop from being pulled downstream. I didn't think about the cold. I didn't think about the crowd. All that mattered was getting to my son before it was too late. With every stroke, I pushed harder. My muscles burned as I cut through the water, fighting against the current, fighting against the fears that threatened to take control. Nathan was struggling, his movements slowing as the shock set in. But somehow, by sheer will, he had managed to free himself from the wheelchair in the fall. If he had still been in that chair, he wouldn't have stood a chance. I finally reached him, grabbing his arm just as his strength began to fade. "I got you, buddy," I whispered, pulling him close, my arms wrapped tightly around him. I kicked my legs with everything I had, pushing us both toward the shore. The cold had already started to numb my limbs, but I didn't stop. Not for a second. By the time we reached the riverbank, a few bystanders had rushed forward to help. They pulled us out of the water, and I collapsed onto the ground, clutching Nathan tightly against my chest. His body was shaking violently from the cold, his breath coming in sharp gasps, but he was alive. That was all that mattered. But then I saw her. Karen. Standing just a few feet away, still holding her phone up, recording the entire thing. My stomach turned. For a moment, I thought I was imagining it. But no, there she was, grinning as if she had just won some petty game. She had filmed everything, every second of Nathan's near drowning. And she was pleased with herself. Anger surged through me, hot and uncontrollable. My body moved before my mind could catch up. I stormed across the grass, my boots pounding against the ground. Karen didn't flinch when she saw me coming. Instead, she lifted her phone higher, like it was some kind of shield between us. I stopped just inches from her, my voice low but deadly calm. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I demanded, my words cutting through the air. She didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. "It's not my fault your kid can't handle himself," she said with a smug shrug, as if it were all a joke. "Maybe if you actually watched him instead of playing hero, this wouldn't have happened." I felt my fists clench at my sides, the rage bubbling up inside me. "You think this is funny?" I barked. "You think nearly drowning a child is some kind of joke?" Karen didn't respond. Instead, she just smirked, as if my anger was some sort of amusement for her. But I wasn't laughing. I wasn't going to let this woman destroy my family. "You listen to me, Karen," I said, stepping closer, my voice now booming with authority. "You don't scare me. And if you ever so much as look in my son's direction again, you'll regret it." For the first time since meeting her, Karen looked afraid. She stumbled backward, her phone wavering in her hand. The smug expression was gone, replaced by a look of fear. Satisfied, I turned and walked back to Nathan. He was safe now, and that was all that mattered. Karen, on the other hand, was about to learn that her twisted sense of control had no place here. The crowd around us was silent, some watching, some recording. But I didn't care. I had one job: protect my son. And I'd do it again and again, no matter what. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. We'd love to hear what you think about today's story, so drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. Was this story as shocking to you as it was to me? What would you have done if you were in my shoes? We're all about creating a community where we can share thoughts, opinions, and personal experiences, so feel free to jump in and share your own stories or thoughts on Karen's actions. Also, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We post new, exciting stories every day, and you won't want to miss the next one. I really appreciate all the support you've shown so far, and I'd love for you to be part of our growing community. Your comments and feedback mean the world to me, and it's because of you that we can keep sharing these incredible tales. So, let us know what you think, and be sure to join us again tomorrow for another amazing story. Thanks for being here, and I can't wait to read your thoughts.